The Thing at Nolan. South of where the road between Leesville and Hardy, Missouri, crosses the East Fork of May Creek, stands an abandoned house. It's been left to crumble since the summer of 1879, with no one daring to occupy its decaying walls. For the 3 years prior to that, however, it was home to the family of Charles May, whose ancestor, it is believed, lent his name to the nearby creek. The May family consisted of Charles, his wife, a grown son named John, and 2 young daughters. The names of the girls remain unknown to the writer of this account. John May was a dour and brooding man, not easily roused to anger, but possessing a chilling talent for simmering, unforgiving hatred. His father, Charles, was quite the opposite, a sunny, jovial man, prone to sudden bursts of temper, like a flame ignited in a wisp of straw, burning fiercely before quickly dying out. He held no grudges, and once his anger subsided, he was quick to seek reconciliation. His brother, who lived nearby, was the complete opposite, and it was a common joke in the area that John had inherited his disposition from his uncle. One day, a misunderstanding arose between father and son, escalating into a heated argument. Charles, in a fit of anger, struck John full in the face with his fist. John calmly wiped away the blood that followed the blow, fixed his eyes on his already remorseful father, and said with cold composure, "You will die for that." 2 brothers, named Jackson, happened to be approaching the men at the moment. Seeing the quarrel, they discreetly retreated, apparently unnoticed. Later, Charles May recounted the unfortunate incident to his wife, explaining that he had apologized to his son for the hasty blow, but to no avail. John not only rejected his apology, but refused to retract his terrible threat. Yet, despite this, there was no open rupture in their relationship. John continued to live with the family, and things remained largely unchanged. One Sunday morning in June 1879, about 2 weeks after the incident, Charles May Sr. left the house immediately after breakfast, taking a spade with him. He said he was going to dig a well at a spring in a nearby wood, so that the cattle could have access to water. John remained in the house for several hours, occupied with various tasks, shaving, writing letters, and reading a newspaper. His demeanor was almost as usual, perhaps just a shade more sullen and surly. At 2 o'clock, he left the house. At 5, he returned, for reasons unrelated to any interest in his movements, and now forgotten. The time of his departure and return was noted by his mother and sisters, as was later attested at his murder trial. It was observed that his clothing was wet in places, as if, as the prosecution later pointed out, he had been trying to remove bloodstains. His manner was peculiar, his look wild. He complained of illness, and going to his room, took to his bed. Charles May Sr. did not return. Later that evening, the nearest neighbors were alerted, and throughout that night and the following day, a search was conducted through the wood where the spring was located. It yielded little besides the discovery of both men's footprints in the clay around the spring. In the meantime, John May had grown rapidly worse, suffering from what the local physician termed brain fever. In his delirium, he raved about murder, but didn't specify who he imagined had been murdered, nor who he thought had committed the act. However, the brothers Jackson recalled his threat, and he was arrested on suspicion, with a deputy sheriff assigned to guard him at his home. Public sentiment turned strongly against him, and if he hadn't been ill, he would likely have been hanged by a mob. As it was, a meeting of the neighbors was held on Tuesday, and a committee was appointed to monitor the case and take any action that might seem necessary. On Wednesday, everything changed. A story arrived from the town of Nolan, 8 miles away, that shed a very different light on the situation. Nolan was a small town consisting of a schoolhouse, a blacksmith shop, a general store, and half a dozen houses. The store was run by one Henry Odell, a cousin of the elder May. On the Sunday afternoon when May disappeared, Mr. Odell and 4 of his neighbors, men known for their trustworthiness, were sitting in the store, smoking and talking. It was a warm day, and both the front and back doors were open. Around 3 o'clock, Charles May, who was well known to 3 of them, entered the front door and exited through the back. He was without a hat or coat. He didn't look at them, nor did he acknowledge their greetings. This wasn't entirely surprising, considering that he was obviously seriously hurt. Above his left eyebrow was a wound, a deep gash from which blood was flowing, covering the whole left side of his face and neck, and soaking through his light gray shirt. Strangely enough, the foremost thought in everyone's mind was that he had been in a fight and was going to the brook directly behind the store to wash himself. Perhaps there was a sense of awkwardness, a kind of backwoods etiquette, that stopped them from following him to offer assistance. The court records, from which this narrative is primarily drawn, are silent on this point. They waited for him to return, but he didn't. Bordering the brook behind the store is a forest extending 6 miles back to the Medicine Lodge Hills. As soon as it became known in the neighborhood of the missing man's dwelling that he had been seen in Nolan, there was a marked change in public sentiment and feeling. The Vigilance Committee disbanded without the formality of a resolution. The search along the wooded bottomlands of May Creek was stopped, and almost the entire male population of the region took to scouring the woods around Nolan and in the Medicine Lodge Hills. But no trace of the missing man was found. One of the most unusual aspects of this strange case is the formal indictment and trial of a man for the murder of someone whose body no one claimed to have seen, someone not even known to be dead. We are all more or less familiar with the quirks and eccentricities of frontier law, but this instance, it is believed, is unique. However that may be, it is a matter of record that upon recovering from his illness, John May was indicted for the murder of his missing father. The defense counsel appears not to have objected, and the case was tried on its merits. The prosecution was lackluster and perfunctory. The defense easily established an alibi with regard to the deceased. If, during the time in which John May must have killed Charles May, if he killed him at all, Charles May was miles away from where John May must have been, then it is clear that the deceased must have met his death at the hands of someone else. John May was acquitted, immediately left the country, and has never been heard from since that day. Shortly afterward, his mother and sisters moved to St. Louis. The farm, having passed into the possession of a man who owns the land adjoining and has his own dwelling, the May house has remained vacant ever since, and has acquired the somber reputation of being haunted. One day after the May family had left the country, some boys playing in the woods along May Creek found a spade concealed under a mass of dead leaves, partially exposed by the rooting of hogs. It was nearly new and bright, except for a spot on one edge, which was rusted and stained with blood. The tool had the initials CM carved into the handle. This discovery rekindled, to some degree, the public excitement of a few months before. The earth near the spot where the spade was found was carefully examined, and as a result, the dead body of a man was discovered. It had been buried under 2 or 3 feet of soil, and the spot covered with a layer of dead leaves and twigs. There was very little decomposition, a fact attributed to some preservative property in the mineral-rich soil. Above the left eyebrow was a wound, a deep gash from which blood had flowed, covering the whole left side of the face and neck, and soaking through the light gray shirt. The skull had been cracked by the blow. The body was that of Charles May. But what was it that passed through Mr. Odell's store in Nolan? The end. If you like the story, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was there anything that surprised you? Who's your favorite character in the story? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.